From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. A man in Raybun County, Georgia, says that he spotted a Bigfoot. The man, whose name wasn't provided, told Expedition Bigfoot that he was driving to work when he noticed the unusual creature on a field near Clayton. He's quoted as saying, "It was early in the morning. It was walking through a field and knelt down at a branch where there are trout present." I'm not sure how trout appear in a field, but this is according to what he said. He reportedly told the Facebook group this over the phone. The man described the animal as being black and gray, according to the post published back on May 27th. He said it was a Bigfoot. The post didn't specify further physical details of the alleged creature, but he added that the eyewitness really wasn't a believer. And out of Lufkin, Texas, a man claims he saw a Bigfoot walking on his eastern Texas property in Angelina County. The unnamed witness had reportedly been hearing strange noises and spotting a shadowy figure several times over the course of the past few weeks. Today, one of my neighbors complained about their dogs being attacked, so I started looking more carefully, he said. Sunday night, on a foggy YouTube video, no one is going to believe me. I came out here earlier with my dog, and there was a hairy creature on the edge of my property, right along the brush line. The man states that he was able to look at it for a few minutes while his dog ran after it before disappearing into the woods. He's also quoted as saying, "I have no idea what it was. It clearly did not look human." Earlier that day, the man says he went back to where the alleged Bigfoot sighting took place, and he photographed an unidentified footprint with what appears to have 5 toes. Quote, "This is proof of Bigfoot in East Texas," he said. The city of Lufkin, named after a cotton merchant, has a population of 35,000 and is situated at the intersections of US 59, currently under construction, and Interstate 69. And a massive bird sighting in California sent in by Stuart Johnson to Phantoms and Monsters. The story is as follows. I saw a bird in California on the western slope of the southern Sierra foothills that was so huge, my brain could not even register what I was looking at. The first few moments that I looked at it, my brain was trying to register it as a guy in a condor suit or some kind of man-made device that looked like a giant condor. But it wouldn't hold in my mind because it was up in the air hovering in place in the wind while batting its massive wings. So its body was a little bigger than an average-sized man. I ended up thinking of it as a condor and just thought maybe they're bigger than I thought. The bird was huge enough that it could probably fly way up in the air and glide from the mountains where it went straight over to the Pacific coast and Channel Islands in no time. And I think that's probably what it did, because I don't know what else it could possibly eat except for dead whales, sharks, dolphins, and sea lions, etc. But the area I saw it in was full of open-range cattle, which die on the range all the time, and it was in a place that blew 40-mile-an-hour winds every day. That's what the bird would ride on. And here's an interesting animal fun fact. The leg bones of a bat and hummingbird are so thin that they cannot walk. Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Remember Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed rescue.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from atop a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is Tuesday night, June 11th on into the 12th. And tonight we're going to be speaking with Dr. Hugh Ross from reasons.org. And pretty important stuff here. The question of science, the Bible. Some of the topics of discussion tonight are going to be what UFOs really are. How does science relate to the Bible? How does creation and astronomy relate to what the Bible says? And you guys know, if you've listened to the show, if you're a first-time listener, then I'll let you know this is a very important topic to me. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. So that's coming up here in just a moment. I want to thank everybody for your support, and I want to thank Class Vaughn for coming on last night. It was a fascinating discussion. He really enjoyed it, and he said thank you so much. And it was a pretty special thing to talk to somebody that has that much background in the study of ufology. And so I'm really excited to talk about this tonight because I grew up a Christian, and the reason why I'm here doing this show is because I've got questions that I didn't get answers for. I couldn't get answers in the church. And so some people would say that I lost my faith maybe, or I kind of backslid. There's all kinds of words for it, right? And I ended up being an atheist maybe for about a month until I realized, okay, there was more to it than that. And then also that led me down the path of the esoteric and hermetics and even the occult. And so I know that there's something to the Bible. There's a great mystery there as well. There's just too many coincidences, too many symbols and metaphors, and we've had too many people that have told us about experiences, whether they were in the astral realm or they had an out-of-body experience or they had some type of paranormal activity. And there's been too many incidences of people that have said, when they called out to the name of Jesus, and some said Jesus, some said Yeshua, that all of these things would just go away. Now, I never thought that that was a coincidence. Now, it could be psychosomatic. Who knows? It could be the mind. I highly doubt it. I'm not a materialist, so I highly doubt that. But this is, I'm kind of intimidated because Dr. Hugh Ross's background, he's got a very good education in astronomy. And so we're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to be discussing what could possibly be these UFOs that everybody's talking about. Now, you know that I've always thought maybe there's a chance that they're interfacing, that they're not actually physical objects from other planets, that they could be something entirely different. But these are just questions, and tonight we're going to go into the void with Dr. Hugh Ross. I want to make sure that everybody, if you have a chance to check it out, go to youtube.com/UFO Seekers. If you want to take a journalistic approach to what's going on with UFOs, they're out in the field all the time. Plus, Tim is doing everything he can to keep a journalistic approach to this and give you some of the best content on the planet when it comes to ufology. Also, the website is ufoseekers.com. And so I think we need to get right into this. And our guest tonight is Dr. Hugh Ross, who's an astronomer. He is the founder and president of Reasons to Believe, which is an organization dedicated to integrating scientific fact and biblical faith. And his books include Why the Universe is the Way It Is, Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, and Navigating Genesis. And the website is www.reasons.org. Dr. Hugh Ross, thank you for coming on Lighting the Void. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, my pleasure.
So I hope you heard my background there as to why I'm into this subject, right? Because I always thought that there was something to the Bible, but I mean, I'll be honest with you, I looked at it from more of a esoteric point of view because there was a lot of hidden gems in there. And when I read the Bible literally, that's when it didn't make sense to me. A lot of contradictions, a lot of verses, in my opinion, that just didn't make sense. Or why would they even say something like that? And also you look into the things like the Council of Nicaea, and they decided what books were what. And I'm sure you've heard it all, right? I don't have to get into all of it. I'm sure you've heard every bit of it because you've got countless interviews and videos on YouTube where you're talking about these things. But how do you address that when people talk about, well, the Bible's written by man and the Council of Nicaea pretty much decided what books were what? How do you address that?
Well, yeah, I come from a different background than you do. I was not raised in a Christian home. In fact, I didn't really get to know Christians well until I showed up at Caltech to do postdoctoral research studies at age 27. But I got very interested in astronomy when I was 7 years of age. Was reading an average of 5 books a week on physics and astronomy. And after doing that for several years, at age 16, realized the universe has got to have a beginning. The Big Bang model is correct. And there's a beginning to the universe, there has to be a beginner. So at age 17, I began to search for that beginner, first in the writings of the great philosophers, and then I began to pick up the world's holy books. And I think what stunned me when I first gave the Bible a serious look at age 17 was seeing that it taught all the fundamental features of Big Bang cosmology thousands of years before any astronomer even had a clue that the universe had these characteristics. And I also realized that the description of creation in the different creation texts in the Bible, everything was correctly stated in the correct chronological order. And so just seeing that predictive power in the Bible made me want to check it in more detail. And I spent 18 months going through the Bible, an average of an hour a day, trying to find a provable error or contradiction, was not able to find any, and just found hundreds of places where the Bible predicted future scientific discoveries. Then I realized this really is a communication from the one that created the universe. And at age 19, I signed my name in the back of a Gideon Bible, giving my life to Jesus Christ. But after that, I kept running into people like you who were raised in religion and had all these questions and needed answers. And so when I was at Caltech is where I began to really engage people in a religious background and a non-religious background too. I saw a number of atheists, scientists come to faith in Christ just through answering their questions about science and the Bible. So that's a bit of my background. And incidentally, I too wound up getting a study of UFOs because when I was 16, I was the director of observations for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada in Vancouver. And I said, we got to have an exhibit at the Pacific National Exhibition. So I organized an exhibit, but they put our exhibit right next to the Flying Saucer Club. So from age 16 onwards, not by any choice of my own, but I wound up becoming an expert on UFOs and have even written a book on it, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men.
Yeah, so I've got so many questions for you, and I can't wait to get it into your material too, because you're the guy I'm looking for, honestly. And I have to give a lot of that credit to Patrick because he knows me so well. He helped me find the guy, he's one of the producers of the show. Help me find the people I'm looking for with the answers that I've been asking on this show. And I took approach to the Bible from like I was telling you earlier, like a literal point of view where the whole Adam and Eve story and talking snake and stuff. And that's what people, they usually start out with, like there's no talking snakes, anything like that. But what I did find is when I looked at things metaphorically or even symbolically, they did make sense. Is that what you found too, or do you believe in the actual literal interpretation of Genesis?
Well, I think it's a lot more literal than people give it credit for. Certainly there are passages of the Bible that are intended to be metaphorical. But when it comes to the creation text, I see that you can take a literal interpretation. It works. The key, though, is to follow the scientific method. in interpreting these biblical texts. And, a lot of my friends in science are unaware that the scientific method came from the pages of the Bible. The Bible not only commands us to put everything to an objective test, it shows us step by step how. And that first two steps of the scientific method are critical. Don't interpret until you establish the frame of reference. And don't interpret until you start identify the initial conditions. And so, for example, when I first picked up the Bible and opened it up to page 1, Genesis chapter 1, Genesis 1:2 states explicitly that the frame of reference for the 6 creation days is an observer on the surface of the earth. And the 4 initial conditions is dark on the surface, the water covers the whole surface, the earth is empty of life and unfit for life, but then the Spirit of God begins to work. But once you establish those 2 first steps of the biblical testing method or the scientific method, then you discover everything is in the correct chronological sequence and everything is correctly stated.
Okay, I gotcha. And it does kind of make sense. Now, earlier you said that that you checked things out, right, historically, in chronological order. Now, does that check out all the way through the Bible, the Old Testament and everything when you check these facts out? Because I have talked to some people about the line of Hebrews, and these are more like esotericists and mysticists. I'm sorry, mystics. Can't even say it right. But they looked into the line of David and Solomon and things like that, and they said they never found any traces of King David or King Solomon or any of these people. And now I didn't look into that myself, but these were people that I kind of trusted. Did you look into that per se, or are you just looking at like the scientific chronological order of things?
Well, I did, but I recognize that there really hadn't been the necessary search to find evidence for King David and King Solomon. In fact, that search was not begun in earnest until 1980, when they started doing archaeological digs south of the modern city of Jerusalem. And today, the whole city of David's been virtually excavated, and so now we got plentiful evidence that what the Bible says about King David and King Solomon is correct. But yeah, the archaeologists had to go there and find it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into myself and check that out, because most of the people that tell me these things are, occultists and esotericists, kind of like myself. I consider myself more of a hermetic or a hermeticist because at this point, but I still I don't know, I believe that there's something to Christianity. Now, the big question, though, that's on everybody's mind, especially with what's going on today and ufology and stuff, is, what is the real possibility of finding intelligent life somewhere out in the universe? Because when we look out and we look at what NASA's findings are and other people and other astronomers, there's a lot of planets out there that just don't offer life. And it's a cool thought to think about when it comes to probability, but we're not really seeing it.
No, we're not. I mean, we are finding lots of planets outside of our solar system, and the list is up to almost 4,000 right now. And I remember back in the mid-1990s when we were first discovering these planets, my astronomy peers were saying they're going to be just like the planets in our solar system. Well, the truth is none of them are like any of the planets in our solar system. And that led to a remarkable discovery that literally every planet in the solar system is critically designed to make possible life here on planet Earth. So I don't know about your family, but when we celebrate Thanksgiving, we thank God for Neptune, for Jupiter, for Saturn, for Venus, because we know they all played a critical role in making our dinner possible. And you're probably aware that NASA's really been focusing on what they call the habitable zone. Mm-hmm. But that habitable zone is focusing on whether or not a planet can conceivably have liquid water on its surface. And if you go to reasons.org, I've written articles, and now astronomers have discovered there's not just one habitable zone that must be met. There are now 11 that are known. And for a planet to be truly habitable, it must simultaneously reside in all 11 habitable zones. like the ultraviolet habitable zone, the astrosphere habitable zone, in addition to the liquid water habitable zone. And of all the planets we discovered, there's only one that exists in even 3 of those habitable zones. And you get 3 guesses as to which planet that is.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest with you.
Well, so what are you sitting on?
Yeah, the Earth is about the only, well, I did look today at another planet. I forget what they called it. It was, it's not in this solar system, though. I think it was called Proxy B or something that kind of looked like Earth. It had water. It was in a different galaxy. It was so many light years away. But I'm kind of really, to be honest with you, I think that's cool, but I'm not fascinated with that. Like, I don't really want to get off the planet or like they do. I know they want to go find it and stuff, but I'm really interested in what created this, what created us. Is it really God? Was it really a form of consciousness? Because I personally believe in creation. Like, I'm with you on that. I just think there's too many things that are perfected for it to be that, for it not to be. But I'm sure you're aware of Neil deGrasse Tyson's argument on that, right? I'm sure you've heard it.
Sure, but you can go to reasons.org/fine-tuning, and that will pop up for you a 300-page compendium where we list all the different features of Earth that must be fine-tuned to make our existence possible on this planet. And if you actually look at the probabilities of all those 400-plus features being met, the probability is way more remote than 1 chance in 10 to the 1,050th power that all those features would be there without invoking divine miraculous intervention. And to put that into context, that's more remote than the probability that one of your listeners will win the California lottery 150 consecutive times, where they buy just 1 ticket each time.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. And nobody has convinced me otherwise of what you just said. But the one time, he did stand in front of an audience and they asked him that question. And he said, well, the best way I can explain it is like this. Let's say you had 100 people or 1 million people in a heads or tails flipping contest, right? And he said, well, let's say it's 1 billion or 1 trillion or whatever. He said, eventually you'd keep doing that competition and it may take a while, but eventually you'd have 1 winner left. And people think that's amazing, but that's how it works. And that made sense to me. But does that make sense to you?
No, not at all. There's a fallacy there because, yes, there may be as many as 1 trillion planets in the universe, but that only gives you 24 zeros. And when I gave you that probability of less than 1 chance in 10 to the 1,050th power, I already subtracted off those 24 zeros. I also subtracted off all the dependency factors. I was still left with 1,050 zeros between the decimal point and the 1. And, this is like the appeal to the multiverse, where people say, well, all this design, it's just pure chance, because after all, there might be an infinite number of universes where they all have different characteristics, and they're saying all this fine-tuning we see is there by pure chance. But it was the atheist physicist Leonard Susskind who pointed out the problem with that appeal is it explains everything. And any model that explains everything explains nothing. He stopped there, but in my book, The Creator and the Cosmos, I gave an analogy that I think works for lay people, that in such a multiverse, you would have an infinite number of planets with an infinite variety of birch trees on them. Birch trees peel white pieces of bark. If you've got an infinite variety of species of birch trees, one of them will be peeling pieces of white bark that measure to be 8.5 by 11 inches. And those pieces of bark will fall on soil. And if you've got an infinite number of varieties of soil, one of those soils will actually be able to imprint random markings on those pieces of birch bark that will look like all the equations, photographs, diagrams you see in every research paper published by every physicist that's ever existed, which means all those research papers didn't come from the minds of those physicists. The multiverse did it.
Understood. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
sense.
It's a
philosophical fallacy.
I can't think. I'm just wondering how you're a really intelligent guy, right? And I'm thinking, how did you come to Christianity? I know you explained it earlier, right? And I understand the chronological order of Genesis, but if you look at like other texts, the Sumerian text, there are a lot of stories that talk about the Christian story, the Savior story. There's countless, all the way back to Egyptian texts. There's also other texts, even Sumerian texts that describe deluges and floods. Why Christianity? Did something happen to you? Did you have a life-changing event? Why did you pick this one? Because, you know what I mean? There's other stories that talk about this chronological thing that happened.
Well, I hear that a lot, but I hear it from people who've never actually looked at those texts. I did. I examined the Enuma Elish, for example, of the Babylonians. Uh-huh. And when I compared it to the Bible, it was radically different. And I also saw that it had a political agenda to it. There was some kind of social motivation. And of course, the physics was all wrong. But when I looked at the Bible, it says, look, there's no political agenda here, and it gets all the science right. Everything's in the right order. It's night and day different from what you see from the Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians. And so, for example, my book, Navigating Genesis, I show you the Enuma Elish side by side with what the Bible teaches. I do the same thing with the Gilgamesh epic. Actually let people see what they say side by side, and then you just see how radically different they are.
And is it radically different even when you compare it scientifically?
Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, like the Gilgamesh epic, for example, has the Ark, this 200-foot by 200-foot boat. It wouldn't even be seaworthy. And, and just the fact of the creation text, everything is in the wrong order. They got human beings way too early. You got the gods fighting one another and killing one another with human-type weapons. So it's really a very different story. And when you compare it with established science, it's easy to demonstrate that it's incorrect.
Yeah, and you can tell I'm a little flustered here, right? Because I'm not used to this. What I'm used to is my story, like you're talking about. I'm not used to somebody that really went down a scientific route and ended up choosing Christianity and then really done their research. Like, this is a very rare thing to me, so I really appreciate everything you're saying, and all of the research that you've done. I know we got a break coming up here we got to take, and I want to get into the questions too. If you guys want to ask any questions, you can. I don't really want to open the phones up just yet, but you can ask a question in either chat room, the Fringe FM chat or Spreaker chat. We'll be right back with Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons.org. Stay with us.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website, thefringe.fm, to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Mal Duquette, Aaron chic, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop, live on the Fringe FM. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Hugh Ross, and we're talking about science and creation, as well as how it relates specifically to the Christian Bible. And coming up, we're also going to get into UFOs. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Ross, is when I looked into history, there is something about the Hebrews and the text of the Hebrews that even secret societies and Western mystics and all of these people, when you look into this stuff, when they get into things like the occult and magic and stuff, they always relate it back to the biblical text. You would think that they would use all these other things, like things from Egypt and Babylon, and they do. But the most powerful things that I've seen from my interviews with other people and my studies in this is the Hebrew language, the God named Jehovah, and the name Jesus. And it's really the Hebrew language is one of the biggest things. And I've always wondered if you looked into that, like the beginning, like where did the Hebrews get their stuff from? If you look at world history from a religious point of view, right? Some say the Hebrews are the oldest religion in the world. Some say it's the Hindus. But in college, they showed me a timeline, and I remember that it kind of showed that the Hindus was the oldest religion. So it gets kind of wishy-washy. You know what I mean?
Well, I would argue that human beings are fundamentally religious. We all worship something. Even my atheist scientist friends worship something. And I think that's the fact that we're not just physical beings. We're physical and we're spiritual. And it's a spirit within us that causes us to ask these kinds of questions and begin these kinds of searches. And what you see in Judaism, for example, is there's quite a few that are into the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is kind of an occultic, mystic, spin-off of what you see in the Bible. Mm-hmm. You got the Bible, you got the Talmud, and you got the Kabbalah. And it's the Kabbalists that get into this mystical, occultic stuff.
Right, yeah. And I've actually done quite a bit of studies in that myself. And I was listening to another one of your interviews, and I got into the occult. I got into Kabbalah, and I still study it, to be honest with you. And I did a couple of prayers that I learned and things like that, and things started happening. I had an out-of-body experience. I saw a couple of entities, and I always thought, well, that never really happened in my life. But I was actually reading Robert Monroe at the same time, so I wasn't sure if it was psychosomatic or if it was because I was messing with these magical things. Well, I was listening to an interview of yours, and I forget who it was with, but you said that a lot of times when people get into this occult type stuff, this is when they start having paranormal experiences, or when UFO and alien activity tends to pick up. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I do in my book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. I talk about how I got into studying UFOs. And I remember taking a course from Carl Sagan when I was at the University of Toronto. And he spent a couple lectures on UFOs, very skeptical, and said there's just no such thing. But I realized he had a different worldview than I did. he believed that there's no such thing as non-physical reality. But being a Christian, I do accept that there are things beyond the physical. And what the Bible tells us is that God created two different kinds of intelligent life, human beings that are physical and constrained to the physics of the universe, and angels that are not constrained by the physics of the universe. And, what I discovered in looking at the UFO phenomena is that probably 99% of what people reported to me as UFOs, I could explain as natural phenomena, military activity, or some kind of human-induced hoax. But there was a 1% residual that couldn't be explained away like that. And when you look at that 1% residual, you see phenomena like these UFOs going through the atmosphere at 18 to 25,000 miles per hour, right. And there's no heat friction, and there's no sonic boom. If it was a physical object, you would definitely get a sonic boom, and you would see heat friction as it goes through the atmosphere. And in some cases, these UFOs crash into the Earth. And when they crash into the Earth, they leave a crater. They actually depress the ground. Vegetation is damaged. Snow is melted. But when you go to the site, there is no debris. There is no artifacts. If a physical object was crashing into the Earth, there would be some artifacts remaining. So the fact that there is nothing, that there's no sonic booms and no heat friction, and yet there's a crater, tells me it's real, but it's not physical. And the Bible's got a lot to say about beings who exist in non-physical reality. And it was Alan Hynek, the physicist that was hired by our U.S. government to study UFOs, who came up with the references to close encounters of the first kind, the second kind, the third kind, and the fourth kind. But what he documented is that when you have really close encounters with these UFOs, it's never beneficial. It's always deleterious. And about the best you're going to come away with are recurring, terrifying nightmares. In the worst case scenario, you get injured or killed by these things. But what I write about in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men is that there's an occult connection, that these phenomena of close encounters only happen to people that have opened doors to occult activity. Mm-hmm. And when they close those doors, that's the end of their UFO experiences. So in that sense, I say this is scientifically testable. And that's something I've noticed, too, in my travels around the world. When I was in the Soviet Union, when the communists were running the show, I discovered that about 10 times as many Russians were having these experiences as is the case here in the United States. But that was a time when occult activity was at a much higher level than it is today. So those correlations tell me that there really is a connection between the occult and UFOs. And I've looked at books written by 6 physicists who've devoted a minimum of decade to the study of UFOs. And of those 6, I'm the only one that's a Christian. But all of us say that whatever's going on in demonology is also what's going on in the UFO phenomena.
Yeah, see, that does make a little bit of sense to me, too. Now, I don't want people to get the wrong idea, and I don't know how much research you've done on this show, Dr. Ross. We've talked to magicians, we've talked to people that have, lots of people that have studied magic and the occult, things like that, even myself. And I've found, I'm not going to lie, I found a lot of truth there. But again, I will say this, that those truths that I did find, especially the most powerful ones, did kind of lead back to biblical things. And I guess I need to really do some more research on this, but I always thought, well, maybe it's because all of our beliefs and something. And it's funny that you bring that up, because last night we were talking to Klaas Vaughn, who's a heavy UFO researcher, and he reported a crash in 1980 that happened to some people in Sweden, where something landed in the lake, but it just disappeared. It crashed, made a big splash, and they really didn't see anything. They sent helicopters out there looking for it, and they want to go dive in and try to find it, and they think something's down there, but no one's real sure. But in your studies, there's been 2,000 cases where things have made craters or hit something, and there's been no physical debris whatsoever.
Yeah, over 2,000 cases where there's been a collision with the Earth, and in every case, there's no physical evidence. So again, it's something real. You wouldn't get a crash if it wasn't real. But the fact that there's no debris, no artifacts, no sonic boom tells you you're dealing with non-physical reality. Which I think is significant because it basically destroys the materialist philosophy that material things are the only things that exist. The philosophy of Carl Sagan is upset there because it basically shows us there really is something beyond the physical realm that we need to pay attention to. Some of it is evil and some of it is very good.
Now, where in the Bible do you see that it talks about astronomy? The only place that I have found, I've seen some astrological references. Well, I guess they could be astronomy references too, but astrological references in the book of Job where they bring up, what does he call it? Can you release Mazzaroth or the bands of Orion?
Yeah, it talks about the Pleiades and Orion.
Right.
And it's an interesting statement. It talks about how the stars of the Pleiades are bound to one another, but not the stars of Orion. And, modern day astronomy has proven that to be correct, that the Pleiades indeed are bound, but the stars of Orion are not gravitationally bound to one another. But I think what particularly impressed me is all the passages in the Bible that talk about how the universe has a beginning. And it's not just a beginning of matter and energy, but a beginning of space and time itself. I mean, as a young man, I was reading the Bible at the same time physicists in Britain were developing the space-time theorems. And those theorems basically established that not only is there a beginning to the universe, there's a beginning to space and time itself. But the Bible said it first, thousands of years ago. And there are 11 passages in the Bible that talk about the universe expanding from a space-time beginning, how it expands under laws of physics that do not change, where one of those laws is a pervasive law of decay. And so as a 17-year-old, I realized the Bible is actually telling us that the universe must get colder and colder as it gets older and older in a highly specified way. I mean, that's the heart of the Big Bang creation model. But 2,600 years ago, 3,500 years ago, we got the Bible making these claims. And it wasn't until the 20th century that you see anything outside of the Bible drawing those same conclusions about the universe.
I think, yeah, okay. So, and the references to things like when he talks about, like in Ezekiel and Revelations, and I found this where he talks about, the ox, the man, the eagle, and the ox, the man, the eagle, and the lion. Now, I've always looked at that, and it just really, unless it's a big coincidence, those things relate to the astrological four corners or the riddle of the Sphinx and the four elements. And I know these are more mystery things that are not really about creation or the beginning of time, but I tend to think that there are a lot of hidden things in the Bible as well, too. I mean, even in the book of Isaiah, he even quotes it and says, I will give you secrets and dark treasures and hidden places, right? So do you think that we should ask questions about the mystery, or do you think it's dangerous to do that?
Well, God made us curious on purpose. I think he expects us to pursue our curiosities. He wants us to dig. He wants us to learn. But there are certain things that we explore that have risks, and we're warned to avoid pursuing the occult, because when we do, we're giving permission to evil angels to influence our life, and there will be consequences, and there'll be harmful consequences. I write about that in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, that if you begin to explore the occult in a deep way, things are going to start happening to you, and they will not be pleasant. And so we're warned in the Bible to, by all means, pursue the study of nature, learn as much as you can, get as much education as you can, pursue your curiosities, but beware of these evil angels that want to deceive you and take over your life.
Right. I get that. I think another thing a lot of people have issues with is, there's two types of mentality. The one mentality that feels like, we're human and we were created and we were created by God, and there's just there's things that we're never going to know, we're not meant to know. Also, that we're not worthy like God is, things like that. And then there's the other mentality that's kind of, I would say, anti-Christian, but not really so much, because some of it's esoteric, that says, well, we're all just forms of consciousness, like sons and daughters of God, pretty much. And we have the same powers Jesus did because Jesus said so, and things like that. So it's not a scary thing to ask about these types of things if you really believe or have faith. I'm kind of on the fence there too. Like, it wasn't too long ago, and most people know this, Dr. Ross, that I believe that, but now I'm not so sure, because when I look out into the universe and I see things like black holes, and right now they said there's some kind of hole going through the Milky Way they can't explain, or the galaxy, and I can't explain those things, then how could I ever think that I could explain anything else? So I've kind of slowed down to it. But what do you say to that? Like, people say, well, why would I worship a God that wants me to be subservient to him and nobody else and no other gods? And if I don't, I'm going to go to hell. Those types of things, they're basic, right? They're just basic arguments, but they do make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it is true that in Christianity you have God wanting everybody to worship him and submit to him, but it's because he made us spiritual beings. And as spiritual beings, we are compelled to worship something and submit to something. His whole point is, you're best off worshiping and submitting to me because I am morally perfect. I've got your best interests at heart. I want you to experience love at a deep, intimate level. And if you go off pursuing other things in the search, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to be hurt. And so he's just warning us ahead of time that, we're going to be worshiping something, whether we like it or not. Let's worship that which is perfect and best and has, all of our best interests at heart.
Right. Yeah. That does make sense. But I'm just saying, some of the stories are, murdering children, stuff like, the Moses stuff, right? That stuff is a little, it's kind of crazy. But when I look at it, I say, well, if we were made in God's image, the one thing that I've talked about on the program is the hero's journey, where people, they like that Rocky moment where everybody wants to be on stage and praised and worshiped, right? And I wonder where we get that from sometimes.
Right. And, the only one that can handle that kind of worship is God himself. And, we're warned about that in the Bible, that when we receive worship of that nature from other people, beings, it'll go to our head and it'll destroy us. And so we're warned to discourage that kind of worship. If people begin to treat you that way, you need to instruct them, look, I'm just a human being. And I'm fallen just like you are. I got problems just like you've got. And so we need to worship the one and only one that is perfect.
Now, do you think any of these experiences, like the close encounters, are positive? Because there are a lot of people report positivity. I've had people say that they talk to angels, or they talk to people that told them that they were here for a reason, or a reincarnation of this and that. And, that stuff's questionable, but there's another narrative out there that all of these things are evil, and demons, UFOs, and all the encounters.
Well, we're also told that not only are there evil angels, there are righteous angels. In the book of Hebrews, we're told that many of us have entertained these righteous angels unawares. God sends them to minister to us. But we're told to test the spirits to see where they are from. And so before you give yourself to one of these encounters, check it out and make sure you're not dealing with one of these evil angels. And, if you're avoiding the occult, then the evil angels can't influence your life.
I understand. I know there's been a lot of reports of people that talk about sleep paralysis. or seeing beings in their sleep. And I wonder sometimes if it's because they read something. When you say avoid the occult, do you mean like don't even read anything about it, don't study about it, or is it more like don't do the practices?
Well, don't do the practices, but there are certain books that I would avoid because they kind of capture you with their fascination. And, I really do believe that a lot of these stories of people having visitations are in fact true. And incidentally, sometimes it's not just your involvement. If you got a close relative that's practicing these occult activities, that can impact you. I mean, you see that in the Old Testament where King David confessed the sins of his close relatives so that it wouldn't impact his life and the life of his family. So I've heard many stories where I'm talking to somebody and they're not involved in the occult, but their grandmother is. And because of that connection with their grandmother, they wind up getting these visitations. But if you confess that as something that displeases God, that cuts the link from your grandmother to you.
Oh, yeah, the generational stuff is real. I totally believe it. And I want to go back for a second and just make sure about what you're talking about creation here. Because from my experience, most creationists talk about the earth is only 6,000 years old. And I find that very hard to believe. Now, I could see where if in the Bible where he says 1,000 years is like one day to God, I could see that as kind of like a symbol for saying, hey, time is different for me. But the exact number where Earth is only 6,000 years old, I'm not so sure about that. Do you follow along with that mentality?
Well, I do, and it never even occurred to me that people thought these creation days were 24 hours until 9 years after I'd been a Christian, because I was born, raised, and educated in Canada, and I never even ran into this until I came to the United States. But when I picked up the Bible, it was clear to me right away that this word day in the original language had to have a minimum of 3 distinct definitions, because 3 are used on the first page of the Bible. Creation day 1 is contrasting days and nights. That's the word day for the daylight hours. Creation day 4 is contrasting seasons, days, and years. That's day for 24 hours. Genesis 2:4 uses the word day to refer to the entirety of creation history. That's day as a long period of time. I also noticed as a 17-year-old, only the first 6 days are bracketed by an evening and a morning. There is no evening and morning for the 7th day. So that tells me that the 7th day is not yet finished. And there are 3 texts in the Bible, Psalm 95, John 5, and Hebrews 4, that tell us that we're still in God's 7th day. And therefore, these creation days have to be consecutive long periods of time. They are not 24-hour periods. And the principle there is, don't settle on an interpretation of a text in the Bible until you've read the entire context of what the Bible has got to say. Read all 66 books. Don't just read the first page.
Well, even in more context, I would say the translations have to matter too, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I would agree, and I tell people because English has such a huge vocabulary size, it's important to read the Bible in multiple translations. And you can go to BibleGateway.com and you can access free of charge 40 different translations of the Bible, because no single translation is going to do justice. I mean, for example, the New Living Bible does a very good job at translating the humor and the satire of the Old Testament, but doesn't do such a good job at translating the specific doctrinal points about the character of God. For that, you want to go to a word translation like the New American Standard Bible. But read them all, and you can get them all on your smartphone these days.
What I mean by that specifically, though, is like the Hebrew version, right? And the Latin and Greek versions before the Bible came into English. Just a small example, like, we in the English Bible, we say God, but the Hebrews wrote it as Elohim, and I'm sure you've heard this before, right? As Elohim is a plural form of God. Some even say it's a gods and goddesses. There's some weird stuff there in the Bible that don't make sense to me. That right, the Elohim part, the fact that that's a plural version, and I have a book that's got really tiny text, but I went through it, and that's kind of the stuff I got confused about.
Well, that's why it's good to have a Hebrew lexicon and a Greek lexicon, so you can actually look at the definitions of the words that are used. And Elohim is the first word you see for God in the Bible, and it actually means the uniplural one, the one that is singular and plural at the same time. And what you notice in Genesis 1 is that God refers to himself with respect to the creation of human beings with singular pronouns and plural pronouns. So it's emphasizing this word Elohim, the one who is singular and the one who is plural, one being, that's three persons manifested, but one essence. All three persons have the same character attributes, the same purpose, the same mind. So that's the doctrine of the Trinity. And you see that again, especially in the book of Isaiah, where in reference to God, it purposely mixes the singular and the plural pronouns.
Okay. Yeah. So that's where, I guess that's where I get tossed up, because I've had a lot of people tell me different things about that. When I've looked into it myself, I've just found that it means plural. I've had some people try to convince me that it means many gods. I've had other people try to convince me that it means gods and goddesses or aliens, right? Things like that. And the more I dug into it, the more it just meant plural.
Yeah, it can't be separate gods, but it actually means the one who is singular and plural. The uniplural one is the correct definition for Elohim. So that basically is an introduction to how God is so different from us. He is triune, we are not.
What about some of the mysteries that a lot of people still haven't figured out about the Bible? Especially, there's a lot of assumptions, and there's with some good references, but it's kind of circumstantial, like the Nephilim, giants, Nephilim, people that were men of renown. Do you have an interpretation of what you think the Nephilim were?
Yeah, you'll find a chapter and appendix on the Nephilim in my book, Navigating Genesis. I do believe they really did exist. And incidentally, they also show up in the Greek legends, that there were these men of very large size, very superhuman capabilities. And so it tells us in Genesis that these are the offspring of apparently intercourse between these evil angels and human beings. And you notice that the Nephilim in the Bible are evil individuals, but they're superhuman. The shortest one is 9 foot 9 inches tall, and was able to carry 250 pounds of weapons and armor into battle. And for a strict human being limited by the laws of physics, that's simply not possible. So I talk about the physics of basketball. How in basketball, the ease with which you sink a basket goes up with a square of your height. So it's no surprise that basketball players tend to be very tall. Makes it easier for them to sink baskets. But what you notice is that the basketball players that exceed 7 feet in height, they have mobility issues. They can't run the court as fast as someone who's, say, 6'4".
Right.
And they can't last as long either. They wind up injuring themselves. And it's just because of the fact that taller you are, the heavier your bone mass must be, and the bone mass goes up geometrically with your height. And it's such that if these Nephilim were purely governed by the physics that we are, they would be completely lacking in mobility once they exceeded 9 feet in height. And yet the Bible tells us that's not the case. It also tells us that they had defects in the sense that they had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And so that tells us that, and you see this in Jude 6 too, it refers to how certain angels left their estate. That is best translated as committing bestiality. God commanded the angels to leave human beings alone sexually, and evidently some of them disobeyed that command. And that's why God was intent on having the Nephilim destroyed, because of the evil they were spreading amongst humanity.
Fascinating. Wow, yeah. So I definitely got some more questions here. We are at the top of the hour. Look, if you guys want to ask questions, you can. I'll go ahead and open up the phone lines because this is I know it's kind of a touchy topic for some, but I feel that it's pretty important. So we're going to get into that more about the occult, ETs, and UFO activity, as well as spiritual warfare, too. We'll be right back with Dr. Hugh Ross. Don't go anywhere.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Alex. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Get the Tea is the #1 cleansing tea in America. We cleanse you with organic ingredients, and when used daily, you can increase your energy. Cleanse from intruders that set up camp in your colon. Cleanse your colon and feel the difference. Colon cleanses can be uncomfortable. Not Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea is mild yet truly effective. Cleanse your insides every day. Easy to make, easy to use, and feel the results. Are you sold? Okay, then here's how to order. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Look for our specials on the front page. Get the Tea also carries top-rated supplements for those who care about their health naturally. Again, log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com and feel the results. And for those of you that arm yourself with information, come to our webinar every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can sign up at GetTheTea.com.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Cannasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Cannasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and Cannasense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma's all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. non-GMO, and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market, AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person, you. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing, we have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use the topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
All right, 1-800-588-0335 is the call-in number. You can also text into the program at 501-777-5631. And you can also ask questions in the Fringe FM chat or the Spreaker chat. Tonight we're here with Dr. Hugh Ross from reasons.org, and we're talking about how the Bible relates to creation specifically and scientifically and astronomically in a historical context, as well as what UFOs and these close encounter interactions really are. And it's Dr. Ross's belief that that all of the stuff in the Bible is true. And if you actually go and study it, and really research, you will see that the chronological order adds up in Genesis and other things. And have I got that right so far?
Yeah, you do. And your listeners can get free chapters of my books just by going to reasons.org/Ross. All right.
Nothing, that's good. Free chapters is a good thing. I think a lot of us are interested in this. And, you know, I have to believe that a lot of people have these questions because they're worried. Like, life itself is a mystery. We all know that. And I would say for people that are Christian, and what I was brought up in, they didn't have a lot of answers to my questions, but when it came to life after death and stuff like that, they just didn't worry about it. They had faith, and that's okay, I guess. But after a while, I just couldn't be that way. I had to ask more questions, and it led me down the road where we're at now. And I think a lot of people are fearful. Right. And I used to take the mentality that the reason why people are Christian and the reason why people stick to religion is because they don't have to be fearful, because it makes sense in their life and they don't have to think about those types of things. But now you're saying that these things are adding up, and I need to really look at this actually a little bit more instead of taking other people's texts. Because, you know, things can get handed down through books. Ideas get passed through books without ever being challenged. And that's another thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, these texts, a lot of these texts were interpreted by men that we think we know who they are, but especially like in the New Testament, we're not real sure who some of these people are. And you're okay with that, right? Not knowing exactly who these people were.
Well, we know who most of them are. We don't know who the author of the book of Hebrews was,
right?
But we certainly know who the authors of the Gospels were. You know, the Apostle Paul was a real person that can be established to have actually existed and written 13 books of the Bible. So there's a lot we do know, but you're right. With everything, just like in physics and astronomy, there are things we don't know. However, we can use our curiosity and our research to dig deeper and deeper, even though we know for certain we're never going to know everything. And it's fun to dig into this. And to me, the principle of the Sabbath is set apart regular time to think about the most important issues of life. You know, it concerns me that so many Americans never think about death. Death is coming to each one of us. And the question of what happens after we die, that's a very important question. And to simply live your life ignoring that question is not wise.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right about that. I think people do think about death, but the second it crosses their brain, they throw it out because they're like, well, that's ridiculous, and I'm just going to worry myself to death, and I'm going to end up having more questions than I do answers, and I don't want to think about that. But the fact remains, it's coming. And it seems like the older you get, the faster it's coming, right? And so this is why we have these questions. And I'm honestly, I would love to just give into a faith and just not worry about it, but that's just not in my nature. And I'm sure you understand that because you're a guy that likes to seek answers too.
But, biblical faith is acting upon what you've established to be true. It's not blind. And, even though we can't know everything, there are ways we can push back the boundaries of ignorance. And, we need to do that. And, we have more answers than we got questions, but they're actually real answers to many of our questions. And to be lazy, I just don't think is wise. Get the answers you're searching for.
I totally agree with you on that. Here's one of the biggest contradictions that has plagued my mind since I started asking questions. The idea of spiritual warfare, that there is a spiritual war going on at all times, good and evil, good versus evil, angels versus demons, things of that nature, aliens, whatever you want to call it. When I look at the Bible in reference in the book of Isaiah, he quotes very plainly that God created both good and evil. In other words, there's no opposite to God, no evil opposite to God. I, the Lord, did all these things. I create the light, I create the dark, I create the good and the evil. Now, I've looked at every interpretation I can of that. Now, if that's true, then that puts me in a hell of a perplexing place, because and there's a lot of bad suffering on this planet, right? Why would he create both and be okay with that and then expect us to pick one side while a lot of us suffer? If you take like Sri Lanka, for example, those people got shot up in a church, and they were, at that time, I'm sure their preacher was telling them, that God is all knowing and all abundant, and he's here to protect you and things like that. And people lose their faith, when suffering happens, when things don't add up with what they're being taught, right? And a lot of preachers did not like that when I asked that question, Dr. Ross, and I showed them that verse in Isaiah, and I said, you can interpret it any way you want. I believe it's Isaiah 45:7, I believe.
Yeah, and it's stated more than once. So, and I think you're right in asking those questions. I mean, what's going on here? And, I spent years digging into those texts. And you mentioned my book, Why the Universe is the Way It Is. Mm-hmm. And basically, that's where I try to give some insight and answers to these kinds of questions, basically making the point that the reason why God created was to magnify the expression of his love. And since love was his main objective, that meant that the beings he was created by necessity would have to be free will beings. If you don't have free will, there's no possibility of receiving and giving love. But by giving us free will, us human beings and the angels, God was taking a risk that some of those free will beings will choose to rebel against him and become, those who commit evil. But once that happened, he already had a plan worked out in advance to use the evil that angels and humans choose to perform as a means to deliver a significant segment of the angelic community and the human community permanently from any possibility of ever experiencing evil and suffering. So God is using our brief exposure to evil as a means to deliver those of us who want to be delivered from that evil. And so there will come a new creation with different laws of physics, different dimensions in which evil will never happen again, but the only people and angels that will dwell there are those who use their free will to choose to be delivered by God's help from ever using their free will for evil intent.
And that doesn't seem wild to you, right? Like that seems logical what you're saying. If there was a God that did that, but it just doesn't seem like, to me, okay, and I don't mean anything bad by it, but to me it's like, why do it in the first place?
Well, Okay, God had options. He could have kept Satan, for example, away from planet Earth for the rest of eternity. However, if he had done that, there would be no eternal security with us human beings in the way we exercise our free will. An analogy I use in why the universe is the way it is this piece of parchment I've got that says PhD on it. It basically guarantees that never again will I have to be tested for my competency in astronomy because I've already been subjected to the most challenging tests. Therefore, it's pointless to test me again. So I don't think it's an accident that the most powerful, intelligent being that God created, namely Lucifer, was the first one to rebel against him and begin to commit evil. That means that we have the opportunity of being exposed to the most challenging test in the context of evil. And if we pass that test, then never again will evil ever be a threat to us. And notice in the Bible, no one gets to experience eternity in the new creation unless they've been exposed to this challenge from the most powerful being that God created. So that's how God gives us the capacity to love, increases our capacity to experience love, and guarantees that never again will we ever be experienced or exposed to evil and suffering. It's just like going to a university and taking the most challenging tests there in the context of the subject that you choose.
And the Adam and Eve story, back to creation again, did he know that they were going to do what they did? Because the story sure seems like that he didn't. I mean, in the story, he says, why, when I'm probably getting that crossed up with a different story, Cain and Abel, but it seems like in these stories, like when Cain killed Abel, he didn't know, like, why does your brother's blood cry out to me? Adam and Eve, like, here's a tree, don't eat this fruit, and they do anyways. Like, I know they're going to do it, but I'm going to tell them not to. And stuff like that doesn't make sense to me either.
Well, I addressed that in Navigating Genesis, making the point that yes, God does ask questions of Adam and Eve after they eat of the forbidden fruit, just like he asked questions of Cain, what have you done? And it's not because God doesn't know what they've done. It's because God's trying to draw those humans to a repentant posture. And as a parent, with my sons, I've done that. I know exactly what they've done, but I want them to admit the guilt, to admit what they have done and actually draw them into a repentant relationship so that the relationships with one another can be resolved. And so I've actually taught in those passages saying these are good texts to study to learn how to be a good parent with your children. Because, God is the one that fathered all of us. And when he asks us questions, it's basically designed to help us realize what we need to do to repair the damage that we've committed.
So are you saying that God would have populated the earth and that wasn't really he had plans to populate the earth? It wasn't really a curse like the story says?
Well, he did give a command to Adam and Eve to multiply and fill the earth. He repeated that command to Noah, and that was after human beings entered into sin. So that was God's intent all along, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of filling up the earth right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's just I've always been taught that it was through sin, right? And it was a curse, and, childbirth they had the curse of childbirth because they sinned, things like that, right?
Well, I don't think childbirth is a sin at all. I think it was a gift. God intended all along that we would do that. The curse is that because of our sin, we're going to experience more pain, more work, and more wasted time in proportion to the sin that we commit. And that's just a consequence of living in a universe where you got the laws of thermodynamics, gravity, and electromagnetism. I actually believe that God designed those laws in an optimal way to ensure that the more evil we commit, the more pain we're going to experience, the more time we're going to waste, the more work we're going to have to do to undo the damage of what has resulted from our evil acts. And that's why when we enter the new creation, there is no gravity, there is no thermodynamics or electromagnetism. They're no longer necessary because there's no possibility of evil happening there ever again.
Interesting. And yeah, that is interesting that you put it that way. But do you really believe that there's a spiritual war going on right now, like this war people talk about between angels and demons that we can't see, that's happening all the time in the unseen realms?
Well, I do believe that, and I would say, how can you possibly not believe that? Just look at how we humans behave. I mean, how do you explain the actions and the thinking of an Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin? I mean, the things that they did were counterproductive to their goals. I mean, here you got Stalin killing 20 million Russians. That was not in his own best interest, but he went ahead and did it anyway. Where you look at the things that Hitler was doing, especially during the last year of the war. He had a plan to wipe out 80 million Germans in addition to all those Jews that he killed. I mean, again, very counterproductive. There's way too much evil in the world being committed by us human beings for there not to be a spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes. In other words, you simply can't blame all the stuff we do on, say, Darwinian evolution, survival of the fittest. We're way more evil than that. Or as the Bible says, we human beings are wretchedly evil. We're also at the same time miraculously virtuous in what we do. I mean, how do you explain the amazing acts of self-sacrifice that many human beings do for people that they never know and never can have any contact with? Human altruism, I think, demands a spiritual explanation. So we're miraculously good. We're also miraculously evil.
Yeah, I think that the whole Hitler thing kind of goes back to my previous statement, and maybe you probably already explained it. Maybe I didn't catch it all, but where God quotes that He created good and evil, right? And then it's like, well, how else? And you just said, how else do you explain that we do evil things if there's not a spiritual war going on? It just seems like. Here's what it really seems like, if I can put it in the most layman's terms possible, that there's a being that created a universe that we live in, and not only are we subject to his rules and laws and everything else, but according to these books, we're just chess pieces on a board, and until we learn to love and act the way we're supposed to, bad things are going to happen to us. And I don't really, it's not like, we didn't ask for that, right? So why do that? Why did you create the evil in the first place? It's like we're just chess pieces to his game, according to the story. And that's what it feels like to a lot of people.
Yeah. What you're addressing is the paradox of human free will and divine predetermination. How the Bible says that God predetermines all of our actions, words, and thoughts, yet at the same time, He's given us the free will to choose our actions, words, and thoughts. In one of the books I've written, Beyond the Cosmos, I try to answer that paradox by making the point that we now have evidence that the universe is not just constrained to length, width, height, and time. There's actually 10 space-time dimensions that govern the physics of the universe. And the space-time theorems establish there must be a causal agent that created those 10 space-time dimensions. And so if you examine the paradox of human free will and divine predestination in the context of a being that can create space-time dimensions at will, what you discover, what is impossible for us humans to visualize, can be completely resolved in the context of a God that has powers that transcend the space-time dimensions that govern our universe. And so I actually show you 3 different ways you can completely resolve that paradox once we grant God the power to operate beyond our space-time dimensions. And incidentally, all 3 of my suggested resolutions may be incorrect. That doesn't bother me because I think God's got thousands of ways He can resolve it. I'm just saying here are 3 ways I know will work. And that tells us that it's not a contradiction. It's a resolvable paradox.
Huh. Okay. Well, it looks like I need to do my research on that, right? Yes, because that's the big question. That's what everybody says, If according to these texts, We're good, we get rewarded good. We're bad, we burn in hell. We get punished, but we get punished for eternity. My father loves me, but he wouldn't burn me in hell for eternity, right? He just wouldn't do it. And I'm supposed to believe that this being loves me more than my father. And I guess that's all well and good. And even if he is real, the way I look at it is, why would I love someone that would be willing to do that to me if I didn't do those things? Not to mention where he quotes that he created this evil where I could choose. And if I didn't do it, it just seems very egotistical and very kind of crazy to me.
Well, here's the biblical context. God gives you a choice of where you want to spend eternity. One of those places, you get to spend eternity in a relationship with him. But if you want nothing to do with God, and there's a lot of people that are in that category, they want nothing to do with God, then God says, well, I've got another place for you. And often people think of hell as a place of torture. The Bible uses the word torment, and actually that Greek word for torment really means a place of restraint. Because the worst thing about hell is the fact that you're there with a whole lot of other people that want nothing to do with God. And consequently, they're not going to be treating you very well. And so God says, in proportion to the evil you've committed here on earth, I'm going to impose restraint upon you to prevent you from making hell a worse place than it otherwise would be. And in that context, we can understand that even in hell, God is expressing his love to the inhabitants that are there in light of the choice that they've made for their lives. And by the way, that chapter where I talk about the resolution of human free will and divine predestination, that's the chapter we're giving away for free at reasons.org/Ross for that particular book.
Fair enough. And the idea of free will is a good thing. Like, I don't think free will is a bad thing at all. I just had to ask that,
Yeah, without free will, there's no possibility of love. And that's what God wants. He created us so that we could experience love and give love.
Yeah, because it's George Carlin was the one that influenced most people with that, and like Robert Anton Wilson and other folks that they influence people. They would get on stage and say, you expect me to believe that this person loves me more than my own parents do. But if I don't do the right things or make the right movements, they're going to punish me, not just for a little bit, for eternity, right? They call it the biggest control mechanism and, lie on the face of the earth. And they did that on stage, right? So it's got a heavy influence, that question I just asked. So I thought it was important. It's not to attack or anything like that.
No, it's a very important question, but I don't see it as a control issue. God's basically giving you a choice of where you want to spend eternity. And he's not going to force you to go to hell. If you want to spend eternity with him, submitting to his love and experiencing his love, then heaven's the place for you. But if you want nothing to do with God, he's got another place that's really going to be appropriate.
Why do you think so many people think God's an alien, especially in the community that I'm in? They look at text like Genesis, and then they look at that story. They look at things like Zechariah Stitchen's, the Babylonian text, things like that, and they come to the conclusion that God is an alien based on all of the evidence that they say they have, but really the evidence is just the books they're reading. What would you say to that?
It depends on your definition of alien. If you're talking about a being that transcends space and time and has the power to create space and time, yes, then God is an alien. But he's an alien that actually chooses to come and visit us, actually humbled himself, lowered himself, and took the form of a human being. So in that sense, he's very intimate with us. But yeah, he does transcend all matter, energy, space, and time. But I think most people think of aliens as a being that's from some other planet. And I know God is the one that created all the galaxy, stars, and planets. And where he operates is beyond the universe. But it's also a God that fills the entirety of the universe. That's what's unique about Christian doctrine. It's a God that transcends space and time and at the same time fills all of space and time.
Okay, and what about reincarnation? Do you think that's a real thing?
Well, it tells us in the book of Hebrews, it's given unto us human beings to die once and then the judgment. And reincarnation, I actually checked that when I was first realizing about Big Bang cosmology, looked at the Hindu Vedas, and they teach a reincarnating universe. And it's their doctrine of a reincarnating universe that's the basis for the idea that we get reincarnated. However, cosmology tells us that the reincarnating universe is not possible. There's only one beginning to the universe. It's not going to repeat. It's not going to recur. And to me, the grand deception is you got Satan and his even angels basically trying to convince you that you got multiple chances. Therefore, don't take this life very seriously. If things don't work out, you're going to get another chance. It's what I've learned as a professor. If I tell my students they can take the exam as many times as they want, and I don't care how many times they fail, just that they pass it, they don't take the test seriously. And I think that's the thing. We realize what God has told us. Look, you get one try and only one try at this life. You better take life seriously because there is no second chance. And so I can easily see the deception behind reincarnation.
Yeah, that kind of, that kind of forces you. That's really that's really a scary thought if you think about it, though, right? You only got one shot, and life is, what are we living to? What, 73? That's the average lifespan now, and it goes by faster and faster. That's pretty fascinating that would happen. I don't know. I still got a lot of questions. I only know we got a little bit more time with you here. I've totally ignored the chat rooms just because I feel like this is my one chance to ask questions to somebody who's actually done quite a bit of research on this and it's got a scientific and astronomical background. So I apologize, but I will look into that as soon as we get back, and I will ask your questions. I promise. We'll be right back.
Lighting the Void Radio.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. A man in Raybun County, Georgia, says that he spotted a Bigfoot. The man, whose name wasn't provided, told Expedition Bigfoot that he was driving to work when he noticed the unusual creature on a field near Clayton. He's quoted as saying, "It was early in the morning. It was walking through a field and knelt down at a branch where there are trout present." I'm not sure how trout appear in a field, but this is according to what he said. He reportedly told the Facebook group this over the phone. The man described the animal as being black and gray, according to the post published back on May 27th. He said it was a Bigfoot. The post didn't specify further physical details of the alleged creature, but he added that the eyewitness really wasn't a believer. And out of Lufkin, Texas, a man claims he saw a Bigfoot walking on his eastern Texas property in Angelina County. The unnamed witness had reportedly been hearing strange noises and spotting a shadowy figure several times over the course of the past few weeks. Today, one of my neighbors complained about their dogs being attacked, So I started looking more carefully, he said. Sunday night on a foggy YouTube video, no one is going to believe me. I came out here earlier with my dog, and there was a hairy creature on the edge of my property, right along the brush line. The man states that he was able to look at it for a few minutes while his dog ran after it before disappearing into the woods. He's also quoted as saying, "I have no idea what it was. It clearly did not look human." Earlier that day, the man says he went back to where the alleged Bigfoot sighting took place, and he photographed an unidentified footprint with what appears to have 5 toes. Quote, "This is proof of Bigfoot in East Texas," he said. The city of Lufkin, named after a cotton merchant, has a population of 35,000 and is situated at the intersections of US 59, currently under construction, and Interstate 69. And a massive bird sighting in California sent in by Stuart Johnson to Phantoms and Monsters. The story is as follows. I saw a bird in California on the western slope of the southern Sierra foothills that was so huge, my brain could not even register what I was looking at. The first few moments that I looked at it, my brain was trying to register it as a guy in a condor suit or some kind of man-made device that looked like a giant condor. But it wouldn't hold in my mind because it was up in the air hovering in place in the wind while batting its massive wings. So its body was a little bigger than an average-sized man. I ended up thinking of it as a condor and just thought maybe they're bigger than I thought. The bird was huge enough that it could probably fly way up in the air and glide from the mountains where it went straight over to the Pacific coast and Channel Islands in no time. And I think that's probably what it did, because I don't know what else it could possibly eat except for dead whales, sharks, dolphins, and sea lions, etc. But the area I saw it in was full of open-range cattle, which die on the range all the time, and it was in a place that blew 40-mile-an-hour winds every day. That's what the bird would ride on. And here's an interesting animal fun fact. The leg bones of a bat and hummingbird are so thin that they cannot walk. Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're speaking with Dr. Hugh Ross, Astronomer Hugh Ross, who is the founder and president of Reasons to Believe, which is an organization dedicated to integrating scientific fact and biblical faith. And it's been a fascinating discussion. Like, these are some of the big questions that I've always wanted to get down to. And I don't know if you can explain the things like, Dr. Ross, like black holes, stuff like that. I mean, I don't expect you to. But some of those types of things are really what challenge my mind as well. Black holes, some of the space anomalies that they find out, these radio bursts that happened, Oumuamua, and things that are ripping holes through space and time that they're seeing now. I
write about this frequently in the blog. I put out a blog every week called Today's New Reason to Believe, and just a couple of weeks ago I wrote about supermassive black holes. And the recent image that astronomers took of the supermassive black hole in a galaxy in the center of the Virgo supercluster, and how our galaxy has a supermassive black hole like no other large galaxy. And it's because of its unique features we can exist in our galaxy. There is no galaxy far, far away. Ours is the only one because it has the just right kind of black holes.
Well, you've been very good at answering a lot of these questions with logic. I still question some of these things, and I think that's okay. But I still have to believe that, and I could be wrong about this, but you don't get to God and Christianity 100% through logic. Did you have a spiritual experience or something that really changed you? Because I know studying is great. I know science is great, but I tend to believe that our experience represents our truth as well. A lot of times, did God, I don't know, change your life? Did something happen?
Yeah, that really did happen. I mean, it was my scientific research and my logic that drew me to the conclusion that God was real and the Bible was his message given to us. But I was going through the Bible, I really admired the moral teachings that the Bible was presenting and said, I want to live like that. But the more I tried to live up to the moral standards of the Bible, the more I realized I can't do it. This was beyond me. And it took several months of just going through the Bible, especially the New Testament, to realize that no human in his own strength or power can live up to the moral teachings of the Bible, but that God himself wants a relationship with us. And if we submit to that relationship, he will step by step give us, greater and greater capacity to live up to that beautiful standard of morality we see in Scripture. And it's when I did make that point of submission, saying, God, I want you to be the master of my life. I want you to take over and give me direction, that I began to see I had new desires in my life I never had before. And I again began to have some real joy in actually studying the Bible and in praying to God and talking to people about what I had discovered. And I realized, wow, that's a special gift. This isn't just all head knowledge. There really is a deep relationship and a love experience we can have when we make that kind of commitment to our Creator.
You know, speaking of Revelations, this is one of the things that, or not Revelations, but the New Testament, that's one of the things that people say, and this is also in the chat room as well. Someone brought it up, and it's a good point, that, you know, Revelations is not meant to be 100% interpreted. It's a book that we should stay away from. Because it doesn't make sense. I kind of disagree. I think it's a fascinating book, and there's tons of symbology, at least that's what I believe, in there. And I don't necessarily think it's a literal, like, apocalypse, but I could be wrong. But when I bring that up, that book, a lot of Christians tend to say, you know, stay away from it, right? It's, you know, not really stay away from it, but you're not meant to know.
No, I think we are meant to study that book. But I think the key is to realize that the Revelation is a capstone of the Old Testament prophetic books. And years ago, I taught a multi-year course on the book of Revelation. But I said the reason why this is going to take multiple years, we're going to have to study all of the book of Daniel, all the book of Zechariah. We're going to have to study much of Jeremiah and Isaiah and of the Psalms, because what Revelation does is it knits together all these Old Testament prophetic books. And so we went through all that material. We really wound up studying 1/3 of the entire Bible. But, I think the book of Revelation is a marvelous book. It's not only telling us what's going to happen in the future, it actually gives us some insight into what the reason why the other books of the Bible are written the way they are. I mean, you get insights on the character of God, the attributes of God. I think it's particularly fascinating what it says about heaven and hell. And so I encourage all people to study that book. And yes, there's symbolism there, but here's the key. The only symbols you see there are symbols that have been defined in the Old Testament. And so when it talks about the lampstands, that's chapter 6 of the book of Zechariah. You go back there, it tells you what those lampstands are. Or it says the Antichrist comes up out of the sea. That doesn't mean he comes up from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The book of Isaiah tells us the seas are the unbelieving Gentile nations. So it's basically saying this future world dictator will come from one of the nations where there is no belief in God. And so I don't think Revelation is all that mysterious a book if you put it in the context of all the Old Testament prophetic books.
What about the context of other books besides that are not in the Bible, like Gnostic scriptures, the Apocrypha, the books of Enoch? Then Enoch is referenced quite a bit, but yet they left it out. What about those?
Well, that's a good question. That's something that the early church dealt with. And they decided that of all these books that were being promoted to be included in the canon of Scripture, that unless it was spoken by someone who was an eyewitness to the events, they would not include it. If it ever contradicted the moral teachings of the Bible, they would not conclude it. And moreover, if it was written way after the events took place, they wouldn't include it. Almost all the apocryphal books were late written. They don't go back to the genre, the timing of the Old and New Testament. And so that's clearly evidence that they were mere human inventions. They were not actual texts. And moreover, if it isn't spoken in the name of the Lord God of the Bible, again, that's how they got it down to 66 books. They basically eliminated all the fraudulent books. The books that probably come the closest are the ones you see in the Roman Catholic Apocrypha, the Old Testament apocryphal books. And of all those books, I think the two that are the most valuable are 1st and 2nd Maccabees, because they do give a faithful recording of the history between the end of the Old Testament era, 400 BC, and the beginning of the New Testament era, roughly 0 AD. And however, the reason they weren't included in the canon is that they actually endorse vigilante murder. And since that's counter to the Old Testament law, they said, we're not going to include that.
And I got a question from the Fringe FM chat. Do you believe that you're going to go to heaven when you die?
Well, I do, because I've made a decision that I want to spend eternity with the one that created the universe. And I want to be submitted to his authority and receive his love. As I said before, God gives you a choice of where to spend eternity. He won't force you to go to heaven. You get to choose where you want to go. But personally, I want to go to heaven. And I think submitting to the authority of God is the best thing I could ever think of doing. So that's where I'm going to wind up. And I also have evidence of what God's Holy Spirit has done in my life that assures me that that will be my eternal home. As it says in the New Testament, you can know for sure you're going to heaven because God gives you a down payment. Based on your commitment to submit your life to the authority of the creator of the universe, it begins to change things in your life. And you just see those changes. That means that you have that down payment. It's kind of like wearing a wedding ring. The wedding ring that I have on my finger is basically a guarantee from my wife that she's going to remain committed to me as long as we both shall live.
Yeah, I've got to ask this just really quick, because my father used to get tossed out of churches for asking stuff like this, and it's about things like works and the 144,000 chosen people, right, and Revelations. There's a lot of people on this earth. Do you think that there's really only 144,000 people that are going to go to heaven?
Oh, no. That reference in Revelation is referring to 144,000 Jews. It makes it really clear that the majority of people will be the Gentiles. But he selects out these 144,000 Jews towards the time of the end to be evangelists to reach the Gentiles. So it's talking about a segment of the people who will be in heaven. It's not a reference to the totality of the number of people in heaven. That's a mistake that Jehovah's Witnesses have made. And if you read Revelation, you can see that their interpretation is incorrect.
Earlier you had mentioned that people have had interactions with entities. Some of them have been good, like angelic interactions, things like that. But I know that I worry about this, like the con. There's either one con going on or not. Like either religion is a con or it's a con that people tell us to stay away from it. And now, have you heard people that have received specific directions from like aliens or entities to reject religion?
Oh, definitely. I've run into that a lot of time in my study of UFO phenomena. And that's why I tell them, look, it says explicitly in the Bible, when you run into contact with a spirit being, tests the spirit to see where it is from, because the evil angels will appear to us as angels of light, as angels as good. Put them to the test. Keep in mind, there are angels out there that have the motive to deceive us. And so everything must be tested. Not only should we test the physical realm, we should be testing the spiritual realm as well.
Specifically to that, I have had many occultists and magicians on here, and I'm not going to lie and say that I've done this myself, where the Rosicrucian, old, I would say Renaissance Western magic, when people get into that, they teach the invocation of Jehovah and that God name, as well as the 4 archangels. In other words, how they make a circle to protect themselves. And the old Rosicrucian text used to talk about, this was all about meeting your holy guardian angel, things like that. It wasn't about power or trying to win a car or a girlfriend or anything like that. It was just about alchemy and ascension and things of that nature. But what you find is that this circle becomes almost like what a magician would do to brush their teeth before they do an operation. And some of these operations are invoking, not always angels, but a lot of the times they could be demons. Do you think that the angels that they're invoking, that they're talking about in these books, are actually the real 4 archangels, that they're actually under divine protection when they do these things?
Well, one way you can discern between whether or not the angelic being you're engaging is evil or righteous. The evil ones will promise you secret information and power, and the righteous ones, they're more motivated on truth, on the communicating truth, which is why we see in the first letter of John that we're to test the spirits to see where they're from. It actually tells explicitly how you can put these spirits to the test. Do they testify of God coming here as a human being and sacrificing himself for all the offenses we human beings have achieved? I mean, I find it interesting that the Orontia book of the ufology cults, it's denying the deity of Christ, it's denying the atonement price that he paid. And so that's the key, that this is a message from the evil angels, not the righteous angels. That's just one example of how we can put this stuff to the test.
When you test these spirits, is there a specific thing you do to test them? I know you may have brought it up, but I want to make sure I understand this. How do you test a spirit or an entity or alien or whatever you run into to make sure that it is who they say they are?
Well, you test their motivations, and you test whether or not they're communicating is actually truth. And so, what's interesting in the UFO cults is how these UFO beings say things about the universe that we know are flatly incorrect. And so that tells us, hey, they got a different motivation in mind. And the fact that their information changes with each generation of humanity. I mean, I write about that in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, is that there's an evolution in what these beings are communicating. And that's a clear sign of deception. And so what are their motivations? And we're basically told in the Bible, you want to test these spirits by how they react to the truths that we can establish must be true that are recorded in the Bible. And so John, for example, says, find out what they think about the person of Jesus Christ. And they begin to deny his deity and his atonement and what he's done for humanity, then you know that you're dealing with an evil angel.
One last question here. I'm trying to get in as many as I got. I hope you can come back and so we can keep talking about this, because this is a very important topic to me.
Yes, do that.
The zeitgeist idea, right? The story of Christ and the Virgin Mary and the Savior. There's been many accounts of it going back to ancient Egypt, and I don't know how many accounts. Some say the Mithras, the ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians. Always the story of a Savior who was born of a virgin, etc. And so a lot of people think that they believe that the Jesus teachings are a teaching of consciousness, and that it's a higher teaching or a metaphorical teaching, and not necessarily a real teaching about a man that died, because this is a mythology that's been talked about since the beginning of creation through many different civilizations other than the Hebrews and what happened in Rome and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And again, I would encourage people, contrast those myths with what you see in the Bible. You'll see a radical difference. I mean, what's interesting is I had a dialogue with the executive director of the Skeptic Society, Michael Shermer, in which he had 2 hours to lay out the reasons why he thought the Christian faith was false and the Bible was false. But they gave me 2 hours to respond to all that. And a lot of the stuff you're bringing up is exactly the content of that. And it's called Responding to a Skeptic, and it's an audio thing they can download from our website. So if they go to our store on our website, they'll actually see that. And what I would want to compliment Michael Shermer for, he really did bring up the best arguments from an atheistic, agnostic perspective against the Christian faith. I also appreciate he gave me the opportunity to respond to each one of them.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. And, a healthy skepticism is a good thing. And I do understand that you appreciate that. And I have a ton more questions, but I will say this, that the time that we've spent, and I know we've only got a couple hours here with you, so we've got to let you go, but the time that we spent, you've been very well. I mean, I'm very impressed about how knowledgeable you are about all of these things and your education and how your temperament is to these types of questions, because it's very hard to bring this up. In fact, a lot of radio shows won't do it because they're afraid they're going to upset somebody. But I, on the other hand, would like to get to the truth, if that makes sense to you.
Well, it's very commendable on your part. I appreciate that.
So your website is reasons.org. You also can be followed on social media at facebook.com RTB official and twitter.com RTB official. Is there anywhere else or anything else other than what you just mentioned about the YouTube video that, based on the questions we've asked you here tonight, that you'd have us go look at?
Well, all of the scholars we have on staff here at Reasons to Believe have their own individual Facebook and Twitter pages where we answer people's questions. So if people just put, Twitter Hugh Ross or Facebook Hugh Ross, they'll be able to find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the program. I can't wait to read these books, Why the Universe is the Way It Is, Hidden Treasures in the Book of Job, and Navigating Genesis. And I hope we can do this again in the future, because I'm going to go back and listen. I don't like listening to my own programs, but I'm going to take notes on this one and say, okay, what else can I ask Dr. Ross, and have you back in the future and keep this discussion going, because I think this discussion that we're having now is one of the most important discussions on the planet right now, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, I would agree with you, and thank you.
Thank you again for coming on the program. All right, guys, we'll be right back. I just have some final thoughts, and we'll get into your questions as well. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
This is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, my old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Innocence is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Innocence does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today. Start your evenings with the Fringe FM long before those other shows get started. Exclusively live on the Fringe FM, hear the Quantum Hologram Matrix with the Reverend John Polk, Tuesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And our newest show, Sci-Spy Radio with Suzanne Ross, Wednesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. Then stay up because we're burning the midnight oil well into the morning hour. The truth is out there, and so are we. Lock it in, the Fringe FM. Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas. The Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonderlight Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com.
I want to thank Dr. Hugh Ross for coming on the program. This is one of the topics of discussion that I think should continue. You know, things that don't make sense about religion and that stuff has to be talked about, especially with people like that. Now, he does have a very, very extensive educational background in astronomy, and he says that it all lines up, and he had a very logical answer for everything. But there's some things that still just don't add up to me, and at least he was admitting that the whole idea of creation, good and evil, the Adam and Eve thing was kind of a paradox. But there's just so many more questions, and I think what I'm going to do is he agreed that he would come back on, and we can get even deeper about these things, because I still kind of look at the Bible like this book that we're supposed to believe that was the universe gave us to go by. And when you look out to the universe and then you take your experiences, they don't really add up. And when we look at history, the reason why things are as bad as they are is because we don't learn from our experiences. We negate our experiences and go to our religions or our dogmas, and we just keep going around in circles. And I want to welcome Eric Markham to the program here in the last hour. Thanks for coming on, Eric. I really appreciate it, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
I am not, I'm kind of impressed by that, because you don't run into that. That's just not been my experience, where you run into somebody that's got that type of a scientific background. I mean, he's even went past his PhD in postdoctoral studies in astronomy, and still yet holds on to Christianity. And I'm sure that baffles some scientists. And yeah, you can go on YouTube and see that he's had many debates with people like Michael Sherman and other scientists, and he really gets into the science of things. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm smart enough to do that. So I tried to ask some of the basic questions that don't make sense to most of us. Did any of that stuff, did he convince you at all, Eric, in any way that the Bible might be literally true?
No, I don't know if I could be convinced of that, to be honest. Might be just me being closed-minded, but I don't look at the Bible as a direct dictation from God. I don't think it can be interpreted that way.
Well, I did mention that through my studies of the occult, and I'm talking about even chaos magicians, okay, talk about how powerful the Christian faith is when they use that type of magic, when they use even the saints. I'm not just talking about Jesus, which that works for a lot of occultists. The Rosicrucians have a ritual called the Rose Cross ritual, or they use it for protection. That ritual is designed to keep you blind and to protect you from entities in the astral realm. And basically, even some say that it protects you from people noticing you in the physical realm. Invisibility has always been a thing that magicians have wanted to figure out, but metaphorically and in the astral realm, it's been known to work, right? According to the books and stuff. Now, I've never done that ritual myself, but regardless of all that, regardless of the technicalities and all the systematic battery of rituals that these magicians do, which isn't, by the way, talked about enough. When you hear about the occult, most people talk about conspiracy and the occult and how they're using mind control on you and things like that, but they never really get into the fundamentals of what they teach into the occult and the practices of it, other than things like sigil magic, right? Stuff like that. They just want to stay with the scary stuff. But there's a lot of work and practice that occultists do that I think people don't really look at. And I'll give you an example. Aleister Crowley is looked at as the evilest man in the world, but no one considers the fact that he was taught a battery of rituals that had to do with invoking archangels and God in his purest form, according to the Hebrews, at every point. Now, he did do some crazy things like step outside the circle from time to time and stuff like that. But my point is that if there isn't some validity to what Dr. Hugh Ross is saying, then why do all the magicians swear by the names of the Bible? You see what I mean, Eric?
Well, when you consider we've had better part of 2,000 years of conditioning, some of us have, and that even if you take the Muslim faith and the Jewish faith, the Hebrew faith, I'm not sure what the correct term is, I would say, these teachings go back far into our collective consciousness. And I believe that symbology, that practice, and that mindset have a power in their own right. if for the last 2,000 years we were taught to worship the sugar beet. Beet juice would be the holy water, and, borscht soup would be our sacrament.
You think that would work the same way it works for these magicians?
With the same amount of belief behind it, yes, I do. I don't know if so much the symbol. I guess I'm saying is that the faith or the paradigm is what gives the power, gives the focus. Now you're taking a
chaos magic point of view more, where because it's a belief that has happened in history, and because so many people have believed it, there's actual power, magical power induced into it, and so therefore it can be utilized that way. That there's not really like a fundamental physical, or I guess you could say behind the scenes controlling God or angels or whatever. It's just the belief factor that's controlling all of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, did the Egyptians who worshiped their pantheon, Horus, Isis, Osiris, did they have any less faith? Was their power any less because they didn't believe in the Abrahamic religion, paradigm?
Well,
the followers of Mithras, were they any less powerful?
Only book here's the funny thing that you say when you ask that question. The only book that says that they are more powerful is the Bible, right? The story of Moses when he went to the pharaohs and the magicians and they cast their staffs down, they turned to serpents, and they knew magic. They did magic. They did astrology, right? And in that book that God showed them that all that magic really comes from him, and that he cursed them, locusts, killing their firstborns, all this stuff, and just kept hitting them with higher and higher magic till they realized it. Same thing in the book of Daniel, right? He had many astrologers and many seers and stuff like that. And these stories, they all go to Egypt, right? But it ends up at the end of these stories that all of these guys end up learning that God's the real deal. I think it was Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel was trying to tell him in that book that, you're going to lose all your stuff if you don't give it over to God. You can't just do this on your own, and you can't just do this with your soothsayers and your astrologers. And that's what eventually happened. Now, according to Dr. Hugh Ross, that happened in history. And I've never looked at it. Like, I just don't know where this evidence is. I'm not saying that he's wrong because I haven't read his books, but I just find it hard to believe until I read his books where we can get that evidence from that these types of things really did happen.
Well, one of the things to realize, if you're writing a book, okay, let's make it simple. You're writing the Bible. You're trying to usher in a new paradigm. You're trying to give power to a new God, bring around a whole new version of belief. You're not going to put stories in there that don't make your boy look like the winner.
Yeah, but the Bible...
You're not going to...
I mean, the other side of that coin would be the Bible was written by many different people, and also many books were taken out of it, which that's another topic. He admitted that the book of Ezekiel was referenced, and that even some other sects of Christianity, like I think he said the Catholics, or they used the book of Maccabees. So he wasn't like being Calvinistic about it to where you've got to be, it's this King James Bible and nothing else really matters type of thing, right? Which I respect that. But if you look at the Gnostic Gospels, and let's consider the fact that the book of Thomas is actually real, then the book of Thomas would be the oldest book that we have, the oldest scripture that we have. And if that book is real, then that really changes the game.
Well, one of the things to realize is that some of the Apocrypha, things that were left out of the Bible and something he didn't mention. By the time you get to the Nicene Council, you have I guess you'd say, the corruption of human ego has gotten into the teachings of Jesus. Now, the Nicene Council wasn't going to put anything in the approved Bible that undercut their authority. They were trying to they put it off as, well, we're trying to give the one true faith. No,
yeah, it's a morality thing. It's called the Nicene Creed.
Right. They're trying to solidify control over this this new burgeoning religion. If you look at how early early Christian communities lived, it was more of a almost like communism in its pure form, without the human greed factor. They looked after each other. They didn't they didn't demand a tithe like most modern churches do now. Give us 10% or God will think you're a turd. It was a voluntary thing, and it was done for the greater good of the community. The early Christian communities baffled the detractors. It's like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't how society works. And, especially when you look at the early Christian community from the point of view of somebody within the Roman Empire, which was a very brutal, almost like a binary logic. Yes, no, dead, alive. This behavior is acceptable. This will get you thrown to the lions type of thing. It looked like a foreign. Well, it was. It was very much a foreign mindset, and it scared them because they couldn't control it. These people were willing to die for their beliefs. Very few worshipers of Mars or Jove or, take your pick of the Roman pantheon, which is mostly stolen from the Greeks. This kind of behavior just wasn't seen.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. And I also agree that with him on the fact that there are some strange phenomena that he explains as ETs and UFOs that are coming from the spirit world. The fact that you've got these things, that all these cases, over 2,000 cases of impacts that happen to Earth where there's no physical debris. I don't think you and I have ever talked about that, but that happens according to these reports of crater impacts or things that fall out of the sky, and then when you go to where it fell, there's nothing there. There's no debris. There's nothing buried. There's nothing, right? And what he's saying is that can only be explained by angels and demons and these UFOs. They're either warring, but for some reason they're flying in here, and there's stuff going on all around us that we just don't see. And every now and then that we've brought up here, that it kind of interfaces onto this plane. I mean, that'd be kind of hard to prove scientifically, but he does bring up a good point that, if you look at the laws of physics, there should be something there.
Well, yes and no. Okay. Everybody knows how, most people understand how a bomb works. Bomb hits the ground, you have an impact crater, and the explosion takes place on the ground. But there's also airburst. Now, who's to say this? As a meteorite or some space object enters the atmosphere and is streaming through the friction of our atmosphere, the heat builds up, and we don't know what this object is, but eventually, before it strikes the ground, it explodes, like the Tunguska event. There was never an epicenter. They never discovered anything in the Tunguska event.
Well, I mean, isn't that the point, though? Like, a ball of fire can't create an impact crater. Not just fire. There's got to be something physical. There has to be mass there.
No, but you're not looking at it. Okay, I'm not articulating my view right. As the object streams through the atmosphere, it picks up heat. It picks up, it burns up. Well, say it's, we don't know all the elements that exist. So this is some rare element, and maybe it takes a lot of heat and a lot of pressure, because you're also mounting pressure as this thing's coming through the atmosphere. Maybe these elements require, it's toward the end of this meteorite's trail that the conditions that create combustion are achieved. This thing blows up, say, 100 feet off the ground. You get the crater from the explosion, but the the cause has vaporized. There's no longer any, there's no longer any trace evidence or any physical evidence that the thing existed, other than the crater left behind when it combusted.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of conspiracy theorists that say that it's energy weapons too. And if you look at the actual documents of those, I mean, they did that is happening. There are energy weapons, but do these energy weapons, are they powerful enough to create impact craters? Right. That's the real question. There are a lot of satellites going up in the air that have, quote, according to Elon Musk, classified things happening all the time and Space Force stuff. So, I mean, it's plausible, I think. But when it's kind of like we're speculating, it's almost like another paradox that becomes frustrating to think about because the physics doesn't add up unless there's some type of element that science just hasn't figured out or some type of weapon that we haven't figured out. It's almost like the same thing when Christianity tells you, well, there's just some things that are just out of your reach that you're not going to know. So again, we're taking things on faith and wondering, but we're still left with the fact that stuff's really happening and that it frightens some people,
Well, okay, I've had a few people I've heard say on different shows that what we have in development is at least 50 to 100 years ahead of what we publicly release.
Well, yeah, so everybody says that.
Yeah, it could be that they've known what antimatter is for quite some time. There's been some attempts at fusion reactors that could create ungodly amounts of power with just a bare minimum of reaction mass. These craters that show up and there's no physical evidence, it could be experiments with that kind of technology. I'm not willing to go to it's angels and demons having battles on the earth type of thing.
Yeah, and you're not willing to go there because it just doesn't logically make sense to you in your head, right?
Well, if everything's a hands-off, free will, non-interference, that has to be the rule. I don't like exceptions to the rule because they disprove the rule. So if the battle between heaven and hell is going on, it has to be contained in a different dimension, or the whole thing is a lie.
You don't think that it could slip through other dimensions, that things slip through sometimes? That's not possible?
Well, I kind of go with Albert Einstein on that. God doesn't play the dice with the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Schrodinger told him not to presume what God could do with his dice. So you've got both sides of that argument. No, I don't attribute those kind of phenomena to I don't think you can have a puritanical or closed loop, God leaves his hands off everything kind of mentality and then say, well, but once in a while things slip through. If God is the absolute creator and the absolute controller of the universe, and he's omniscient and omnipotent, those things aren't going to happen.
Right. And to his point, another point he made is that certain things slip through because people are practicing and doing things they shouldn't. And we didn't really get into that because it gets kind of repetitive, where people say, you're messing with Ouija boards, or you've opened up something that you don't know what you're messing with. I could have talked about that, and he does talk about that. But that's a repetitive subject, and it's more speculation. I was more interested in how the timeline of Genesis adds up to creation. And he's got some really good research when it comes to that. But then again, we don't know I really believe we don't know how old this earth is. And if you study things like the esoteric with Manly P. Hall and all these other people, they talk about that. They said, look, these teachings in the Bible and other texts, they are fundamentally good for a system of morality. And there is something strange about how these stories have been handed down since the beginning of time. They don't take away the fact that it could be a divine thing, but they don't stick to one book or one religion, right? And that's what Freemasonry was all about. It was all about trying to get to the light. And the truth was the fact that there were fundamentals in every religion that's been handed down since the beginning of time. It's just a system of morality. But there was other references in the Bible and things like divine revelation that he talks about that Manly P. Hall talks about, and other symbols in the Bible, like the astrological symbols, the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagles brought up, I don't know how many times in there. That's the riddle of the Sphinx, the four elements, the four corners of the astrological wheel. That stuff's brought up, but then we're kind of taught that astrology is an occult type of thing, and you should never mess with it, yet it's referenced quite a bit. And then I read the verse that I brought up in the Bible that talks in Isaiah, where he says, I will give you hidden treasures in dark places, so you'll know that I'm the Lord. That's kind of a weird statement in the Bible, right? Hidden secrets and hidden treasures in dark places. What does that mean? So it's all up for interpretation, I think. And I think some people just want to have faith, but then again, we got to continue the discussion. I think we need to have him back on, because some of the interviews I've listened to him when he really gets into the science of things makes a lot of sense, but just because something makes sense doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? You can create a story. I can tell you a story, a beginning, middle, end, and show you the correspondences and correlations to it. It doesn't mean that it's 100% cosmically true. And we didn't get into that discussion of faith, but religion is faith-based, and I have this issue with a lot of things. Like, I've got to see it. I've got to touch it. I got to know it. And my experience tells me that there's more to it than just that book. That's what my experience tells me.
Well, you had a war, in effect, for the control of the world's mindset. And I think you have to look at it sort of as a propaganda war in a lot of ways. I mean, even within Christianity, there's not a single truth. There are those, even within the Catholic faith, there are those who don't take the divinity of Jesus Christ as, truth. There's many, there's religions that say Jesus was a prophet of God's, but that he wasn't, God made flesh. There's no agreement, even within Christianity, of what Christianity really is. Was it just a lone rabbi and, who didn't like the fact that the Roman Empire had become a killing machine and was trying to change the paradigm? Or was he in fact born of a virgin? And that very element of Christianity, the virgin birth, is also seen in Mithraism. Isis herself is considered a virgin goddess. She's the goddess of fertility, but she's also considered a virgin goddess. She conceived one of her children once Osiris was dead. She conceived the child, by laying on top of the sarcophagus of Osiris. So there's no physical contact, but yet here comes a virgin birth. This keeps going back in time. You can find, several examples of that being part of a religion. And a lot of Mithraism found its way into Christianity because the early Christians couldn't practice openly, and they practiced their faith, beneath the city of Rome in the old Mithric catacombs, and I guess you'd call them churches, temples that were actually under Rome. So a lot of the precepts and stories from Mithraism leaked their way into Christianity. And let's not forget, Jesus wasn't born Jesus Christ. Christ is a a title, an honorific, like the Buddha. Gautama Siddhartha was not named Buddha. Buddha was the title that people ascribed to him as an enlightened one. The same thing, Christ is not his last name. It's a title that was ascribed to Jesus of Nazareth, son of Joseph.
And the resurrection story, too, is in a lot of this stuff as well. But he did say that that Shermer, which is, I think he's like the ultimate, he runs Skeptic Magazine, that they had this debate. It's on YouTube, and he talks about all the points of it, too. So I'd like to watch that and just see before I get into that. But I know what you're referring to there. I mean, it's easy to look at this as a mythology, right? But more importantly, here's the facts, right? Paranormal experiences are happening to people. Because I know this because it happened to me. I don't know how many people. I don't know how many people are lying. All I know is that they're happening, right? We've got UFO activity. Don't know who's telling the truth about it or who's not, but there's enough to say that it's happening. And then you got this thing where everybody's trying to reach out and find an excuse for their beliefs. Like right now, the biggest thing I think that's on everybody's mind is, why is there this metal on the moon? I think that's the big thing going around right now, right? Other than the legal papers everybody are talking about, but the metal on the moon, right? That they just found out about, that's there, and the reason why it's so big and the reason why they're pushing that article out is because people believe that the moon's a planet. Other people believe that it's a base or it's a UFO, and if you say, well, there's hidden metal underneath this crater, that kind of proves that it's, it could just be a meteorite with nickel in it, and that stuff got buried underneath it. I mean, there's an example of physics when it makes a crater. Now it's leaving some type of anomaly buried underneath it. There's something there, right? That it makes sense to me, but for some reason, it's a big mystery.
The remains of a nickel iron meteorite, which is what most meteors that are recovered are. They're nickel iron.
Yeah,
it's a very common element, and it's, the birth of a star creates it. So this might just be debris that's hitting the moon from the birth of our own solar system.
Right, exactly. We only got a few minutes left here. I do want to say, look, if you like this show, please send us your support. You can do that through PayPal. There's donations there. You can also grab a T-shirt. I know a couple of people got some new T-shirts, some new hold on, let me mute Eric. I think he's eating or something. Some new T-shirts. And if please send those pictures in if you can. I want to see you with your T-shirt on there, right? And then also, if you order anything from preparewiththefringe.com, you will get a free T-shirt if you buy anything for $100 or more. Now, I want you to realize this. They don't just have food there. They've got, of course, the food is the biggest thing, but they've also got all the survival stuff that you need, everything you can think of, the air filters, the seeds, the heirlooms, even wind-up radios. So if you're a prepper like me, and I'm kind of adding to my collection slowly but surely, go to preparewiththefringe.com. They got some good discounts there for you. But we'll be right back. A little bit more Lighting the Void coming up. Also, the Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable's coming up. I think he may have a pre-recorded show for you because he's still out on the road, I believe. But he wanted me to tell you guys that he is traveling back, and all of the shows will resume the way they were before. We'll be right back.
Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on the Fringe FM.
Follow the Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at the Fringe FM.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Lighting the Void is proud to announce Mind and Magic's Protection and Defense Course for protection from magical and psychic attacks. This is not a joke. Magic practitioners are on the rise, and with that comes attacks from baneful or black magicians that try to harm or hurt others for their own selfish reasons. If you are not a believer in psychic attacks, then this isn't for you. If you are, and you want the power to defend yourself and your family and home, then I highly suggest you grab Freighter Xavier's Protection and Defense Course. In this course, you will learn how to tell if you are under attack from a natural source or if an individual is attacking you. The 4 forms of curses and attacks. How to remove self-imposed curses. The correct way to cleanse your home from negativity or malevolent entities. How to make your own holy water. What you should always keep near or under your bed. Herbs that banish negativity and promote purity. The most powerful banishing rituals on the planet. And for those that seem to want to harm you the most, how to put your enemies in a hell pit of their own making. You can also learn protection against shadow people and other entities. Or are you just in a bad planetary alignment? Even how to get rid of an enemy using a tic-tac box. It does not matter what your faith or belief is, this will work. Click the banner on the website at lightingthevoid.com or go to lightingthevoid.com/Xavier.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
Want to know what's on the Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
righty. Just a few minutes left of the program tonight, and I am very shocked. You know, there's quite a few people chatting, both on Spreaker, some chat going on in the Fringe FM chat room, but I'm very shocked that more people didn't have any questions about that. Usually when you talk about a controversial topic, everybody gets up in arms, but I think a lot of people probably did go check out the guy's research. I think it's really cool, actually. I know a lot of people were expecting me to be the devil's advocate for the entire interview, but I can just tell you that, you know, I don't know the answers to the questions of God and Christianity and all that stuff. I don't pretend to know, but I can tell you that based on my experience, that some of the stuff he's talking about makes sense. Some of the stuff the occultists talk about makes sense. And the fact that he brought up when people get into the occult, strange things start happening. That has definitely been the experience in my life. And you guys have heard all those stories. Now, I do want to give you a correction. I went back and listened to the Robert Monroe book, the first book, and I thought that he was talking about a serpent being. But and maybe it's my memory. I think we do that from time to time. Like our memory gets twisted up and we recall something that wasn't exactly the right facts. But I went back and listened to that, and he said that they in the astral realm, that they would run into a being that they inadvertently knew when they were in the astral realm that the only thing that he could describe to call it was the one, or the being, or the Almighty, and that everybody had to lay down and arch their abdomens. Now think about how weird this is, right? You're having an out-of-body experience, and all of a sudden a presence comes around, and everybody that you see, whether they're passed away or entities, doesn't matter. Nobody talks to each other. Everybody just lays down because they know, and they know they're not to really look up at them and to arch their abdomens. And that is a representation of submission, right? How weird is that? Now, he did describe it as like he felt a powerful presence move over him and move over the people that he was around in the astral realm and whatever, like it was divine, he said, almost. And I'm misquoting a little bit. He never really brought up a serpent. I think it's the fact that everybody had to raise their abdomens up in submission that made me think that it might have been some type of serpent being or something. So I wanted to correct myself on that, but that is very, very strange. And that happens. And the one thing that I worry about, and we've been worrying about this since the beginning of the time, since people have been talking about, don't go into the light, it's a trick or whatever. Well, that's kind of funny. You think, well, that doesn't make sense. The light is a good thing, right? Well, you look at these occultists and they have experience with angels that they're invoking, and they think they're invoking Gabriel, or maybe they are, who knows, right? Or all the four archangels. Maybe they are. Maybe we are, who knows? But he says that a lot of times these are false, evil angels. He didn't call them demons. He called them evil angels that are representing themselves as the divine angels. I just think a lot of that is really the only true part of what he says is that when people do these things, strange things happen. And I don't think we can push that away, right? I don't think we can say, well, you know, these people don't know what they're messing with, and that's why strange things happen. And they're afraid of what they don't know. But I don't think that we can negate that. It's kind of like Independence Day. I know everybody's seen that movie, right? Where the aliens are coming and you got the crowd of people that are going to go up to the top of the Empire State Building, and they're going to hold up their New Age woo-woo signs and say, welcome to Earth, please save us, you know. And they get this great divine feeling like everything's about to change, and finally we're going to be validated and syndicated, and, you know, the aliens end up blasting them out of the sky, right? So it's all speculation, but what I would say, and I know a lot of people think that I'm all for magic and mysticism, and I am in a way, because I believe that a lot of it's good, and at least the understanding of it is a good thing. The understanding of any of this knowledge is a good thing. But I still believe, and this is just my belief, is that when you get into these things, you need to take it slow, because you assume to know a whole lot about it because you've read a lot of books and you want to try something, that it's not dangerous. When every single practicing magician that's been on Lighting the Void, some very well-known ones, all of them but one have said that it's absolutely 100% dangerous. Right? So I've gotten, I don't want to get the messages about how I'm trying to scare people away from the occult. That's not it at all. I want you to study it. I mean, I can tell you details and details of stuff about the occult, but I don't want to become this guy that's really smart about the occult, and I don't want to, that's not me. Right? But I want you to be careful, that's all. That's all I'm saying. Because I believe curses are real. And I know that's kind of, I'm talking to a scientist, Eric Markham, right? Like, imagine a scientist thinking that curses, I believe that stuff's real. I believe there is some type of weird evil going on that people can put on others based on my experience, based on the generations. And some of you that are listening, you have a generational curse. You know it's there. You just don't want to admit it, right? Because you've got no way to back it up. You've got no scientific evidence. Well, I'm just from a poor family, and we just keep having these problems of suicide and drunks and negativity and this and that, and it's just the family. No, that's not supposed to be like that, right? Where do you think that stuff comes from? It's all in your mind? I don't think so. What do you think,
Just
Eric?
because it's in the mind doesn't make it any less real. Yes, I am a scientist, but I also have a foot in the paranormal. I have a great deal of belief in the esoteric and the paranormal. I don't discount things lightly, because if one thing that doesn't exist I know now exists, that leaves the door open for a lot of other things that aren't supposed to exist. It's like once you have that one revelatory experience, your entire mindset
It changes everything.
If you choose to let it. I had the option of saying, "Oh, I was asleep and dreaming," or I could have explained away my own experience. However, I believe it was the scientist in me that wouldn't allow that to happen. Just because the experience wasn't supposed to exist, maybe science can't prove the existence of the esoteric, but it can't disprove it either. And I think that's the problem with modern scientists. They think just because their tool, science, doesn't prove something, instead of saying, well, it may exist, we just can't prove it, they say, well, our tool can't show that it exists, it does not exist. And a lot of them want to disregard.
They get in a big argument about first cause too, right?
Right.
Like what the first cause, we can explain everything except the first cause. And some scientists will say, well, there was no cause. There was just nothing. That explains everything. There was actually nothing before something. Well, what's the first cause? What is it? You don't believe in miracles, right? You believe in everything you can explain except for that one miracle, right? That's science, or at least they're trying to. But it is the biggest mystery. But regardless of all that, my biggest questions are, and you guys know what it is, I hope that you know by now, is the secret teachings, the teachings of the mystery schools, those teachings that have been hidden from us, that certain churches and sects and secret societies and all these other people that have been hidden from us that we've been taught are evil things. Why has that been hidden from us? Has it really been to protect us, or has it been for power reasons? Think about that.
I think it's been for control. I really do. I don't believe that all of this got started. Well, that's just because that's if you as a founder of a religion, say, or the you're the progenitor of a belief system, you think you have the answer, and you have a cadre of, or say even a cabal of people who want to see this come about. You're going to weigh the odds in your favor. You know, once human ego enters anything, that thing is corrupted. So you have this beautiful philosophy on life. Love your neighbors, you love yourself. Do unto others.
Until you want
worship.
worship.
Have this Christianity, you know, you have this Christian ethos. Now, you've got people who say, hey, you know, we don't have to go work out in the fields and sweat like the rest of these people if we act like we've got the answer, or we can make these people think we're their only way to, you know, like in Catholicism, they go as far as saying that, you know, they feel like they've got the lock on this.
Oh yeah, they've always been that, like the chosen.
Catholicism
the Hebrews
is
do the same
Christian
thing.
faith.
Yeah, the Hebrews do the same thing. You know, they feel like they're the chosen frozen.
Well, that's part of the reason, like, the Gospel of Thomas was taken out of the book, because the Gospel of Thomas did not back up the idea that you need a centralized church to commune with God. You know, I don't know how the quote goes completely, but it's basically, if you turn over a rock, I am there. If you split a log, I am there. You know, that God was in all. And it, really, if you look at some of the apocrypha of the Christian faith and some of the early writings, it smacks very much of Buddhism.
Yeah, and
there's a
like
lot
you
of
said
Buddhism
before,
in that.
It didn't line up with their moral compass, so they didn't put it in there. But I get, I get all that. We talked about that a bunch.
So much a
here.
moral compass. Well, it wasn't even so much as it being a moral compass as a.
It doesn't line up with their dogma. It's pretty simple.
Well, it's not even that. It's if we let people say, you know, if we let this out, that God is in all things, including us. Now, every one of us listening to this, there's a divine spark of God in all of us. What need do we have of a centralized church?
Well, you don't.
You know, there's a lot of people out there that haven't had to hit a lick of a snake for for most of their lives, because they're part of the control in a religion.
Right. Listen, I get what you're saying, you know, but we figured that out after the Calvinists, right? Christianity figured that out. Jesus told them that. Christianity figured that out, and you can talk to any Christian in the world. If you sit next to them and actually sit with them, you know, they might try to get you to go to church, but they always say, well, you know, I feel like, religion isn't really spirituality. I'm not religious. I'm just a Christian, and you don't need any man to tell you anything. They all say they've got that figured out. And there still are people like, you know, the Catholic Church and others that feel like you got to answer to them, the rabbi systems of the Jews, stuff like that. That stuff's just obvious. It doesn't make any sense. But the biggest questions I have everything to do with the hidden knowledge and the mysteries in the Bible and divine revelation and all the codes that these people are finding, the Kabbalistic references. And there's just too many correspondences that I don't think they're making this stuff up. And I think a lot of people want the answers. Now, Bill Cooper back in the day, you know, if you really look into Bill Cooper, people say, well, he was against this and thought everything was aliens. But if you really listen to everything he said, he changed his mind in the end. And that's what we got to be able to do. We got to be able to change our mind, and we've got to be able to be what I was talking about last night, which is self-correcting. You know, if you can't, the minute you say you've got it all figured out, and this is the biggest thing I think out of all of this, ufology, the paranormal, Christianity, you name it, right? The biggest problem I see is when the minute you say you've got it all figured out, you're done. You're done. There's no more learning for you. You've got your ultimate truth, and everybody else is out of the picture. you've got it all figured out. And I think that's the biggest con. But an interesting point that he did make up is that we were created in God's image. Well, if you look at our nature, especially with all the, I guess you could say, evangelism that's been happening in the UFO community, and this just isn't in the UFO community, right? We talk about it because it's our place, but it's in everything. Tony Robbins, every speaker, every preacher, it's called the ego. It's in human nature for us to want to have a crowd of people paying attention to us, and not just there focused on us, but also standing in ovation to clap at our ultimate becoming of whatever we are. And I think we get caught up in that. Like, we stop asking questions. We start telling people we know everything. We become an evangelist. We start a YouTube channel. We talk about QAnon or blue aliens, whatever cult, this and that. And then, you know, the money people get involved. They see that there's, oh, look at this crowd building up. And then they get their hands in it and they make, you know, idols out of these people. And you can definitely see that it happens here. It happens in religion. It happens in everything we do. We all got a dream and desire. And if you look inside all of those dreams and desires, and a lot of times you'll see the ego. You'll see someone standing there singing or making a speech or hitting a ski slope or doing something, and everybody stands up and applause. And so they can stand up and say, I told you so. This is who I am. I am greater than everybody thought I was. I am special, right? And you all should know it. And they cry. And that's, if anything, could be of the God complex that could actually show us that maybe we are in the image of God, where we want to be worshiped and we want people to gather around in a crowd as we become whatever. It's just a thought. And maybe there are beings out there that are telling us that, yeah, that's what you should do. You shouldn't give in to the universe and the creator of the universe. You should do what you become, who you are meant to become, and have everybody see it. Meanwhile, we can't see the forest for the trees because we're so caught up in our own dreams and desires that we forget about others, and we forget about their suffering, that they need help. You know, I think about that stuff sometimes. It's a paradox in itself. And I think what it comes down to is balance. And that's kind of like a Buddhist thing, right? You got to take care of yourself, but you also can't forget about others. And you got to watch your ego, and you got to be self-correcting. And I think if you can do that, then maybe we'll get somewhere here, but I don't know. We're going to continue to go down this road. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk to Gian Kozar. We're going to be talking about the Bermuda Triangle, and he has been researching the Bermuda Triangle more than anybody. And the Bermuda Triangle, is a mystery, right? And this guy's got the best research on it. His research began over 12 years ago, and he has compiled the largest private repository of reports and official maritime documents with over 350 cases about it, spanning over 2 centuries. And there's still weird stuff happening there today. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow night. We got to get out of here. I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void. Please don't copy this without written permission. Up next is The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. The music goes by Chronox, Bundy, Kevin MacLeod, and Space Station. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.
Staff. Listener discretion is advised. We told you weeknights on the Fringe FM are now even better, and we mean it.
Do it live!
We're else can you hear the best shows and the best talent? Kick off your evening with our newest host, Alex Exum, live at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 Eastern. Hang out with me, Joe Roop, on Lighting the Void at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. Ryan Gable expands your mind on the secret teachings at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern. We're bringing the heat every single night. Fire it up, The Fringe FM.
Yahoy there. This is Gigi from Shift Happens. And holy shit, you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Hey, don't you dare turn that speaker.